All right, wonderful. So we, of course, today are speaking about operating grants at PCF specifically. So we'll do some quick introductions and just introduce the team. My name is Rebecca Hughes. I'm the Director of Grants Management here at Pinellas Community Foundation. I've been with the team for a couple of years now, and I've been in this role since January. So I am excited to be learning all of the wonderful opportunities that PCF makes available to the community, but also learning who you all are and the services that you deliver to our community. So I'll pass it to Duggan, who is our CEO.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Duggan Cooley. I'm the CEO of the Pinellas Community Foundation. I've been here for almost the last 9 years and enjoyed the wonderful opportunity of being part of the PCF team. I'm here to help Rebecca and the rest of our team, and here to help make sure that we have a great operating grants process again this year. And so I'll let Brittany and then Jackie introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany Baldwin. I am the PCF Foundation Associate. I tend to help out with any tech issues you guys have if you're trying to get into the grants portal and you need to reset your password, or if you need to add somebody or view your history. I am your go-to for all of those tech questions, but also if you have general questions about the grant, I'm here as well. We try to be all hands on deck because we know this can be an overwhelming process at times for folks. So we are here to help. But yeah, I'm your go-to. I've been here since 2020. I came on to help with the CARES project. And so I'm kind of following suit with the operating grants. And if you need anything, just holler.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Roche, or Jackie. I oversee donor engagement and communications at PCF. I've been on the team since December of last year. If you have any questions regarding branding or communications, messaging, I'd be your point of contact for that. I'm really excited to work with you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And thank you all so much for your introductions that you have been placing in the chat. We appreciate that. Also, just very grateful to the team that we have on screen for all the support that you've given me, as well as the support you give to our nonprofit. So digging into the agenda for today, we are going to briefly review sort of the history of operating grants here at PCF. We're going to talk through the eligibility criteria and the award amounts that are available. We'll go through the process timeline and any important dates for our applicants. We'll pause for questions at that point, but please recall you can add those questions as needed during the presentation. Once we have that initial round of questions answered, we'll actually walk through the letter of intent in the grant portal so you can see what those questions are. We'll review any next steps and resources, and then we'll have time for any additional questions at the end. So please do just engage as appropriate. We're excited to hear what you all are curious about. So generally, what are operating grants? If you're new to nonprofits, this might be an unusual phrase for you, but generally operating grants are funds that cover expenses such as like rent and utilities, maintenance costs, salaries, fringe are like your benefits, the taxes that are required to cover payroll taxes, things like that. Anything that's a consumable, office supplies, those are our what we consider operating expenses. So things that are not operating expenses are capital improvements, large purchases, if you're buying property, if your organization is trying to make an investment in their endowment or their reserve investments, those types of expenses or costs are not eligible under this operating grants process.
Rebecca,
Yes.
we had one question that I think is good to answer now is whether or not this presentation is going to be available on the web.
Oh, yes.
And so we're recording this, and it will be available for everyone after.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug, and I appreciate that clarification. So that's generally what operating grants are. And so at PCF, we've had operating grants here since well before my time. But Duggan, if there's anything that you'd like to share about the history of operating grants at PCF, that'd be great.
Sure. So we're very proud of the fact that we have been offering operating grants to nonprofit organizations. The pool was much smaller, but back in 1979 is where we have traced back how long we've been offering an opportunity for operating grants. But when the program began, it was really an invitation-only process, and applications and updates needed to be provided every year. And there was not really systematic process for adding organizations. Often the board would look at community need and then add organizations if additional money was available. And then often funded the same organizations over and over in a kind of by invitation only process. When the process was created, only social service providers were able to apply for operating grants at PCF. And that changed, I think, in about 2017. We added the ability for arts and culture organizations to be added as well. And then in 2016, 2017, we opened up the process to the entire community in a competitive process, allowing organizations to provide applications, including those that had never been funded by Pinellas Community Foundation before. So we're very happy that we have continued that ability to have an open process for those who are eligible for the operating grant program. And the funds that provide the money for operating grants every year come from PCF's discretionary grant fund. And that fund is really a combination of gifts that donors are making on an annual basis, as well as a portion of the unrestricted permanent funds that are held here and invested at PCF. So donors from long ago who left gifts to the foundation through their estate plans are continuing to fund operating grants today, as well as current donors.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Duggan. And like I said, still learning a lot myself. So if you all have questions about our historical processes, we're always happy to answer. Although I may have to refer to some of my local subject matter experts to get back to you on those details. So currently, with our PCF operating grants, we have moved to a 2-year cycle. So right now for the 2026-2027 operating grants process, we are in what we consider year 0. So this is the year that the application actually occurs in. And we've changed the naming convention that we've used for it just to reflect the years that the awards will actually be distributed in. So you're applying in 2025. If awarded, you'll receive those funds in 26 and in 27. So we started this process 2 years ago with those applications coming in through 2023. The funds were awarded in 24 and then again here in 25. So this is the second time that we'll be using this 2-year cycle. So always learning, always open to feedback. We do have 2 tracks with the focus on direct community services and arts and culture. So being able to sort of recognize the importance of both of those funding streams without them having to compete directly. And then making sure that the folks who are receiving these funds have a physical presence in Pinellas County. So your headquarters may be here, or you could have some other type of physical presence. Maybe you have someone who comes in and provides services at a local library, or you have a co-location agreement with another nonprofit where you're using their space, but you're the organization that's delivering services. There's a lot of possible permutations of this type of arrangement. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out and speak to our team about whether or not your organization is eligible. And so just philosophically, we've had some changes over the years with those 2 tracks, the direct community services and arts and culture. Sometimes it's challenging to have those both in the same review committee. And so it didn't seem fair to have arts and culture competing against issues like childhood hunger. But those 2 pillars of Pinellas County's overall well-being are both important to focus on. And so by separating those out, we are able to to really highlight the importance of both of those elements of life in Pinellas County. So again, a 2-year cycle that we've moved to, it allows predictability of funding for our organizations. It reduces the amount of time that your staff is spending with their application process. And then for us, for PCF staff, during the off season, we are building relationships, we're analyzing the data that you are sending in, and really just trying to strengthen our own presence in the community while still being able to provide this as a resource for our nonprofits. And our long-term vision is to increase the accessibility of funding to all eligible nonprofits that are serving Pinellas County. So Duggan, I'm not sure if there are any other points you wanted to make on sort of the philosophy. No?
I think
Okay.
you did great.
So in terms of the funding priorities that PCF's board has identified, there are really 4 main areas that we are focusing on with that direct services sort of lens. So improving health, enhancing the quality of life, as well as advancing education. So there could be many different interpretations of how your organization helps to support those areas. For our arts and culture organizations, we're asking that you're improving cultural awareness or enhancing the public's accessibility to arts. So really just highlighting how your organization fits into those funding priorities is helpful for our team when we're reviewing, and for the review committee when they are looking through those full applications. So for organizations that are interested in applying, we do have criteria that we use to just check and make sure that the folks who are applying are eligible. You must be a 501c3 public charity for at least 1 calendar year at the time of application. You must have a physical presence in Pinellas County, making sure that you're only spending these funds within Pinellas County or to support Pinellas County residents, that you fit within the funding priorities we just walked through, that you are a direct service provider or an arts and culture organization, and that you've been operational and providing services or programming in Pinellas County for at least 1 year. That's a really important component, is that you're already in the community, and this is helping to support that engagement.
And so, Rebecca, a couple things that we might want to look at, if you can go back 1 slide to the focus areas.
Ooh, yes.
We had 1 question about what is meant by access to justice. And so programs that typically fit under the access to justice category are legal aid organizations, typically, or if your organization is helping people address issues that are coming out of the criminal justice system, you could consider yourself under the access to justice category. And then I think under advancing education, clarify what types of scholarships would be considered. Generally, that's scholarships to attend college in the definitions here. And so organizations that have a primary function of providing scholarships for students attending college or technical education as well, after graduation of high school, are the types of organizations we would generally be considering under providing scholarships. So that answers, I think, 2 questions that were on there. And then when you were going over sort of what operating expenses were early on, just some examples there, we had 2 questions in the question area about a nonprofit specifically that is an equine assisted mobile therapy program. And would things like hay, grain, veterinary costs, halters, buckets be considered operating expenses? And the answer is yes. And so those are eligible operating expenses under this program. So things that are used in the regular course of operating your organization in service to the community generally are considered. And then we had, I think there was another one specifically. So salaries for team members that perform community services, training and professional development, office and co-working rent, membership space, marketing and membership fees, those types of things, if they are part of the regular operating needs of your organization, so you can provide services, those are eligible expenses. And let's see. So, and then we had another question, just presence. If you want to go to the next slide, Rebecca, that you did, about the presence in Pinellas County. Um, if you are at a farm in Webster, but services are in Pinellas County, if you're providing those services, so the definition Rebecca was talking about, if you're providing the services at a physical location regularly in Pinellas County, you would be eligible to apply. And so even though where the mini horses are, if you are providing the services at a regular location here in Pinellas County, maybe you're doing that at a facility that does something similar, and or another location, you would be eligible to apply if you're doing that regularly here. And I think maybe we'll go back one because there are several questions about these areas of focus. And we're not asking you necessarily to select the areas. We know that most of the applications received might fall into many of the opportunities here. These are just the priorities that our board has set for funding for things like for funding from things like our operating grants. And so if you fit into multiple, we're not asking you necessarily to put yourself into one of these categories or only one of these categories. You just need to be in one of these categories or have services and benefits to the community in one of these categories to apply. So if you're in multiple, that's great. If you're in one, that's fine too. And if you're under advancing education, that question was about scholarships for providing additional mental health training for existing mental health professionals. If you're an organization, a nonprofit that is providing mental health services, and that was an operating cost of your organization to pay for people's continuing education so that they can continue to provide great services through your organization, then that would certainly be an eligible operating expense. And so the question was about asking another one about this specific category, and would be if the ability to talk to anybody at PCF to assess whether you fit under the priorities. If you have specific questions about that, we'd be happy to talk to you about how you fit. But you don't have to fit squarely under one category. You might be providing a variety of programming or assisting in a couple different areas. But you're certainly welcome to talk to our staff individually if you have questions about whether or not you fit for your own individual eligibility.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. And I really appreciate that. I know there's a lot of nuance going on with some of these questions. And so we will talk a little bit more about how you can speak with PCF in just a little bit, as well as some specific information about the timeline. So we will come back to some of these questions in just a moment, but please do keep those coming in. We'll try to keep an eye out and make sure that we're answering the ones that are more specific or perhaps more general and might be applicable to multiple folks on the webinar. We'll try to continue answering those in real time, but please rest assured we will get to all the questions during the webinar period. So if we haven't answered yours yet, we certainly will. So in terms of eligibility and funding priorities, I feel like we've covered those, but just to make sure that we are clear on organizations that are not eligible, we do have this list. It is on our website. So hospitals, schools and school affiliated groups, vocal and musical ensembles, animal welfare organizations, houses of worship, governments, continuing care retirement communities, and private and grant-making foundations. For all of these organizations, with the exception of the last one, typically they have other funding sources available that some of our direct service providers don't have access to. And it's also really difficult for us to fund everybody. If all of these types of organizations were also allowed to apply, we would have a very diluted effect on the well-being of Pinellas County. And so that is what what we are really focusing on. And so it is not that these organizations do not provide benefit. It is that we only have so many resources that we can share. And so we are trying to be very focused in the impact that we make in the community. And for our folks that are private and grant making foundations, this is not the funding source for you all. So if you have any specific questions about that, please do either put those in the Q&A, and our team can reach out to you independently after the webinar, or please reach out to us at grants@pinellascf.org with any specific questions on that. So in terms of award amounts, generally there's a bucket of money. And so we split it between the two different grant tracks. Historically, we have directed about 15 to 20% of that total fund to arts and culture organizations, and 80 to 85% of the funding goes to the direct community services track. And that's typically how we have allocated those funds in the past. We do have award limits for our organizations who are applying, depending on the size of the operating budget that is serving Pinellas County. If you are under $500,000 for Pinellas, you could receive $15,000 per year for a total award amount of $30,000. For our folks with operating budgets in Pinellas between $500,000 and under $2.5 million, your max award amount is going to be $40,000. And then any organization where their operating budget in Pinellas is over $2.5 million, that maximum award limit is $50,000. And then this is where I kind of turn into a little data nerd. And I'm really excited that we've been able to pull some of this information for you all. Brittany did an absolutely stellar job combing through our legacy software grant portal. So big props to Brittany. Thank you for your help with this. But what we saw in the 2022 and the 2023 windows is that about 10% of the letters of intent were actually abandoned by the applicant. So part of what I would like to learn with this cycle is maybe why did that happen? So if you do feel like you're going to start an LOI and then decide not to apply, I would just be very curious to understand why. If it has something to do with the process itself, and if there's something we can do to make it more accessible, that's really important to make sure that this is a process that as many folks as possible can participate in. We did see in 2022, we had about 150 LOIs that were submitted. And in 23, we received 184 actually submitted LOIs. And so this cycle, I'll be real transparent. We are not sure what we're going to get. There have been some changes in the landscape that are not a surprise to anybody. And we've also had a bit of an increase in the public's awareness of PCF and what we do. So it's entirely possible that our estimate of 200 LOIs is very low. And so I'm excited to see what we actually get and who we're able to connect with. Unfortunately, it is a finite amount of funds. And so we are expecting that we'll be able to award between 50 and 60 applicants. So generally, of course, this is a process that we're going to repeat again in 2 years. And so this is the outline that our team follows generally. We have our letter of intent period, and we use the phrase letter of intent mostly because that's what our software has labeled this as. We think of it more of as a preliminary application, as opposed to a letter of intent, right? You're not writing a letter to somebody. There are specific questions that we ask you. So we do provide 4 weeks during this LOI period. And once that window closes, that is when review begins from PCF's internal team. And so we use a scoring process and really do our best to make sure that the LOIs and the full applications that our review committees are looking through are really strong organizations delivering really critical programming to Pinellas County. So those decisions are shared out in early September. We have our full application window. We offer that as a 6-week window, and those are sent to the committee in October. The committees have about 6 to 8 weeks to review. Those decisions are made throughout the month of November, and the decisions are presented to PCF's board at the board meeting in December. Once those are approved, then we are able to share out those decisions with the awarded applicants. That's also when we let people know if their application has been denied. So in terms of important dates for this LOI specifically, you're in one right now, our first overview webinar. We are opening the letter of intent to everyone on July 14th. So this upcoming Monday, you'll be able to see the actual LOI. You'll be able to start drafting your answers. That will be something that opens, like I said, in just a couple of days. On July 31st, we'll have another webinar that we're offering where we're going to speak specifically about outcomes, as well as what our LOI reviewers will be looking for with your answers. This is intentionally going to be very general because our PCF internal team is the group that's doing the initial scoring of our LOIs. We can't give you specific advice on how to phrase your answers. We can let you know if you're in the ballpark, but we can't necessarily assist with content. On August 11th at noon, the letter of intent window closes. So I did see somewhere there was a question that the website was a little bit off. Please disregard, it is not August 8th. It is August 11th at noon. And the reason that we've chosen this time is because oh, my brain just short-circuited. Sorry, y'all. We've chosen noon on Monday because we don't want there to be technical difficulties at midnight on a Friday. Like, that sounds terrible. So we want to make sure that we're available for you all if you click the submit button and the system breaks, right? If that happens, send us an email, call the office. But if it is not resolved and we are not contacted before noon on Monday, August 11th, unfortunately, we are going to have to enforce that hard deadline. Our team will take about 3 weeks to review however many submissions we get. And so we'll have our decisions for you all on September 2nd. That is going to either be a denial or yes, you are moving on to the full application stage. We will have another webinar on September 3rd at 11. It will be geared towards the folks who have moved on to that full application stage. We'll do another walkthrough, talk through the intention of those questions as well. You're welcome to attend if you aren't awarded, if you want to view it as a learning opportunity, but of course there's no obligation to attend if you're not awarded. But I do want to make that registration available so that you all can put it on your calendar and be aware ahead of time that is when that resource will be provided. So I mentioned this a little bit, that we do have resources right now for you all. You can visit our operating grants webpage that has all of the information about the overall grant process itself. Obviously, this webinar and our outcomes webinar are going to be presented live, as well as be provided as a recording. Those links will be available on the website just as soon as the recording is done being processed. And then you will have access to staff during the LOI window. We can help with technology and eligibility related questions. We do ask that you review all available resources and answer as many questions as you can before reaching out. We can tell you where to put certain information, but we can't really help you with the quality of your answers. We do prefer email. Just that way, it is the fastest way to get to us. We can make sure that somebody is always in that grants inbox. And if we need to set up a call, we can certainly do that. But that way, we're really kind of limiting the number of inputs for the staff. The link to schedule time will be at the bottom of the grant description in the grant portal. So you've done, steps 1 and 2, or I'm sorry, you've done that first step where you're reviewing all of the resources available to you. You have pretty much everything in place, and you really just need some FaceTime. We will have a link where you can schedule a Zoom call in the description in the grant portal. So one element that's important as well is that our official communications about the LOIs themselves are going to come through the grant portal, and it uses an automated system to send those emails. So please make sure that that email address, administrator@grantinterface.com, is on your safe senders list. And please make sure to check your spam filter regularly during the application window. And that way you're not missing any important updates. And if you're concerned, just shoot us an email. Let us know that you have a question about that. Now, if your LOI is denied, you are able to schedule time with the PCF grants team. We will provide specific feedback on the content of your LOI. We can share opportunities for how you might strengthen it for future applications. It will take place after the full application window has closed, which will likely be late October. And then, of course, November, December, if availability isn't working out. And a scheduling link will be provided in the notification email where that decision is shared with you. Of course, you can always reach out afterwards if you want to schedule time, but just that way it's sort of an easier link. You can just schedule it right away if that's something that you're interested in. So I know we went through a lot. We are going to jump into the LOI itself and actually go through those individual questions, but I wanted to pause and see what questions have come in that can kind of be addressed before we dig into some of those more specific ones. Duggan, I see you've got your mic off.
Yes, so I think we have a few of them that we can answer before we move on.
Okay.
One of them being about our nonprofit organizations that fund and support small businesses eligible. And the answer is yes, that fits broadly in several categories. That is one type of community education that is provided when you offer programming like that. That's also access to resources. It fits into several categories. So that type of organization is eligible. Question about access to healthcare, if there's anything specific that PCF is focused on in the category. There aren't specific focuses under these categories or things that we think are more deserving of an operating grant than others. I think in some ways you can think of the categories pretty broadly. So if you are doing work that fits up under the access to healthcare focus, then there's not one thing that's more of a priority for us than another, at least not through the operating grants process. And so another question was about capital grants and whether we offer capital grants at any time. We used to offer a specific capital grants process that was highly competitive, and we have put that money instead into the operating grants process to be able to award more operating grants. We find that the operating grant, the money from operating grants is not as widely available in the community or from grantors as a whole, either here or around the country. And so we are focusing on making sure organizations have funding to assist with their operations. I think one of them was about if you offer services from or at a house of worship, are you eligible? And generally the answer is yes. We're agnostic as to location that you are using to offer the services, but the organization itself needs to not necessarily be that house of worship. So some of our churches and our congregations in the community invite nonprofits to offer their services through that location. That is totally fine. And then if you are a house of worship, some of them have a separate 501c3 that helps make services available broadly to the community. If you have that separate 501(c)(3), you'd be able to apply as well. Let me see, Rebecca, if there's others that we can answer. Who reviews the LOIs? There is an internal team, grants team, plus other staff here at PCF that reviews the LOIs. That is done as an internal process, as well as the review of the applications themselves. So if you move from the LOI to the application, complete an application, the applications themselves are reviewed by it's broken into 4 committees of board members of PCF, supporters from the community leaders, others involved that do not have conflicts in the nonprofit ecosystem. They review the full applications. Neither the LOI review or the application review is a meeting or event that is available to the public. But we do provide feedback to organizations after both of those if you are seeking feedback based on whether or not your application was funded, if we can offer anything to help improve. And if you are an applicant or a recipient to another grant process at PCF, like our Senior Citizens Services grants, you are not precluded from applying or receiving this grant. And so if you've gotten grants from other funds at PCF or didn't get grants from other funds at PCF, that has no bearing on your ability to apply or receive an operating grant. So want to make sure that you know that you could receive funding from multiple sources at PCF, or if you got denied for some reason in another process, it doesn't mean that you can't apply here. And you had gone over the email address, the grants email, the general grants email, grants@pinellascf.org is the best email to contact. All of our grants team have access to that email, and some of our team will be in and out of the office during the LOI process and also the application process. And so if you email that email, it gets reviewed by multiple people, and it's not sitting in someone's email while they're out of town and not being able to get you an answer back for questions you might be asking. So please use the grants email for grants related communication with us.
There's one, Duggan, where the question is the nonprofit as a whole serves a nationwide audience, but they have a project here in Pinellas County. It's a literacy or education project. And so the staff costs and the building and maintenance costs associated with that project would be part of what is covered under this grant that they would apply for. My understanding is that the services that are supported in Pinellas County, that's where the funds can be used for. And so that organization would be eligible.
Yes, they would be, and when we get into the full application, one of the questions that we'll be asking is what % of that type of project actually benefits people in Pinellas County. And so you might at that point need to make a distinction for us. If that program wholly supports Pinellas County, or Pinellas County residents can participate, and that makes up 70% of the audience for a particular program, that's generally how we then break down and consider the operating expenses. But that gets more into sort of the details of the full application. But if you're in Pinellas County and there is benefit to Pinellas County people, even if there's benefit nationwide, then you'd be eligible, as Rebecca said.
And then I appreciate this question. It is addressed on the website, but I believe we actually did forget to put it in the presentation. So I appreciate the request for clarity. A nonprofit that is not yet a 501(c)(3, can they apply through a fiscal agency arrangement? And so my understanding is that that is allowable. However, that is the only entity that could apply for that 501(c)(3. If you have one 501(c)(3, we can accept one application.
Yes. And so if you happen to serve as a fiscal agent to multiple nonprofit or multiple agencies, we're accepting one application, as Rebecca said. So you need to check if you are working through a fiscal agent of 501(c)(3 that is serving as your fiscal agent, you're going to need to check with that organization to determine how they're putting their application together.
And then I think we just have two more questions kind of related to general eligibility and usage of funds. Is there a preference with organizations in certain areas of the county or any geographical restrictions other than being in Pinellas County? And we do not make that distinction in this grant application process. There's no extra points awarded for being located in one area over another. The physical limitation is Pinellas County. And then, oh, someone must have dismissed that one. Thank you all. And then do we ever give a partial award if the evaluators feel an application is only partially fundable? Yes, we have given partial awards before, and that allows us to expand our impact, perhaps being able to award multiple organizations with some amount of support. And I'm not sure if we have a historical philosophy on this, Duggan.
Yeah, it's that answer to that question's evolved a little bit over time. We do try and get organizations, if we can, what they have asked for. But there is the possibility that there could be a partial award available. The other piece is, I think someone asked one question about, can you apply for less than the amounts? And the answer to that is yes. If you're a smaller organization or you're a really small organization and you want to, and you're in the small category and you want to apply for $10,000, which would be a 20,000 grant over 2 years, you could do that. And that does not affect necessarily the organization's scoring in the full application either. We ask that organizations apply for what they need. Most of the time, organizations want to apply for the full amount they're eligible for, but there are circumstances where organizations ask for less money. If you ask for less money, it doesn't mean that you get put to the head of the line or anything, or bumped up against others or bumped above others in the full application process. But ask for what you need, and that will be considered as part of the project. You're not ineligible if you need less money than you're allowed to request. I think that's
Perfect.
no.
Thank you. All right, so the last question that we had come through, yes, all of these questions and answers will be posted afterwards. They'll be available on Monday. So thank you, Duggan, for helping to address some of those. We are going to shift now into reviewing our LOI form.
Rebecca,
Yes.
just one thing, if people want to continue asking questions or something comes up related to content we already covered, go ahead and ask it and we'll get to it at the end. And so happy to continue answering questions, but we'll try and do live answers related to the LOI that Rebecca's about to go through as we go through it. So don't think we forgot your question if we don't answer it right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Duggan. So one thing I did want to just note before we dig into the LOI, we have had an interesting journey as it relates to character counts, and how many characters are allowed in a given field. And so what I have learned is that making more characters available does not give us stronger information. It does not allow the reviewers to understand more deeply about the organizations that are sharing these applications. It seems as though having more characters actually dilutes the impact of the answers to these questions. And so we don't want that to happen to you all. We want you to be able to provide very clear, direct responses to the questions that are asked in these applications. And so the character limits are there kind of as guardrails to help keep you all from going off the rails. And if anything is concerning about how many characters you have available, please keep in mind that 2,000 characters is between a page and 2 pages of information. And so we are really hoping that you all will provide succinct, clear responses to these questions. So that is the statement about character. character limits. So we'll go ahead and move into our LOI, and this is going to look a little bit different when you all log in on Monday. We want to make sure that you are able to navigate through everything. And because there is some logic that we use in the application itself, it just would be very difficult to navigate in this setting. So we just kind of have the administrator view available right now, and it will be more of an applicant viewpoint when you all log in. So our first section is going to go through our qualifying questions. And as Duggan said, please do make sure that you're still adding your questions into that Q&A. Brittany and Duggan, please feel free to interrupt me if there's something that we need to address as we're going through those questions. I appreciate your help. So our first question is, has your organization been a 501c3 for at least a year? One thing you may notice as you're going through is that we'll have this letter C as an icon next to some of our questions. If your organization has already put together their candid profile through GuideStar, you may be able to import some of these answers. So that is a function that you would go through on the Candid website, not through the grant portal. So if you have questions about that, if you're not sure how to link those, please feel free to reach out and we can help with that. It's also not a requirement. It's just for those of you who have already done it. Hopefully it makes the application a little bit faster for you. Just checking that your organization has been offering those direct services or programming for at least a year. Double checking that you don't fall into one of these categories. And then checking that your organization is registered with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services as being able to solicit donations in the state of Florida. So this is really, really important for your organization to have. You click here on Check a Charity, that will take you to the website. You'll be able to just check and see if you are listed, and if not, we do encourage you to begin that process immediately to make sure that you do have that, that you are allowed to participate in those activities. So again, any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. And then just checking to see which track you would fall under. So if your organization offers therapeutic services and one of your programs is art therapy, we would consider that a direct community services program. If your organization is an arts and culture organization that happens to provide programming in the public or teaches one of these different disciplines, you would be an arts and culture organization. So any questions about the specifics on which track you qualify for, please just reach out and we can help you.
And Rebecca, I will say it would be helpful if you really do have a question, if you're arts and culture or direct community services, to ask before you complete much of the application. Because it is very difficult for us to move things. We can move things from one application to the other, but if you check first so that you can get a definitive answer from us, you'll be in the right type of application from the very beginning.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Duggan. So then for everybody who is filling out an application, we are going to ask about your organization background. We are going to provide the links to the webinar as well as a Word copy of the LOI. So if you want to review this webinar, or if you want to, print out that Word document and work on it outside of the grant portal, you'll have that, that functionality. So here we ask, of course, for your organization name. We also ask for your mission statement, and this is just the blurb that you put on your 990. We're not asking for vision and values. We really just want a very direct statement about the work that your organization does. So the mission statement should be pretty straightforward. Your EIN, this helps us to check with your eligibility for this grant process generally. Making sure that you are noting if you are headquartered in Pinellas County. If not, we would like to understand how your services are connected to Pinellas, what your total operating budget size is, so for the entire organization, and how much of that is spent in Pinellas as a percentage. So if all of your budget is spent here in Pinellas, it's 100%. If you're a smaller program in a larger organization, we would just want to understand what that percentage is that's here. And in terms of the dollar amount, what is spent in Pinellas is what we're asking for with these with the budget size that's supporting Pinellas County. So if it's less than 500,000, if it's between 500,000 and 2.5 million, or if it's above 2.5 million, that is the amount that we are looking for only in Pinellas. So for those of you who are in one of those tiers, the amount that you can request is up to a certain amount per year. So if you're requesting 15,000, your total award would be 30,000. Duggan, what's up?
And I was going to say the question that was asked earlier as to whether you can request less than the tier allows, this is exactly where you would put that information. So you may be less than a $500,000 budget organization a year, and you can request up to 15,000. If you want to request $7,500 a year, that is exactly where you would put that information. So for many, it's probably the total amount, but others, if it's less, you certainly can put that in this box.
Perfect. Thank you. In terms of how you are going to use the funds, so the intent for funds, generally, we hope that you'll be using these funds to help build your capacity over time, to strengthen your operational foundation. So it's helpful for PCF's internal team to understand how you are using these funds. This information is not shared with the full application review committee if you move on to that phase. And this answer can change, right? There could be changing circumstances where you thought you were going to use it for copy paper, and it turns out you need to use it for salary. And so those shifts are okay. We just want to understand how you are, how you're using these funds and how it's strengthening your operations. Also, if you're spending 50,000 on copy paper, I'd love to know how that is strengthening your mission. Duggan.
I was going to say, we just had a question about the part a little that asks the total amount of funds you're requesting, and if that's the 1 year or the cumulative total for both years. And so what you're putting in there is the 1 year answer, the 15, 20, or 25,000. And it will be the same. The final award will be the same amount in both years. We don't allow organizations to say, oh, I need 20,000. If you're awarded 40,000, I need 25,000 my first year and less money in my second year. But the answer that you're putting in there is the 1 year answer or per year answer.
Awesome. Thank you. And I may change that to be a little more clear before you all see that question on Monday. So I'll poke around at that and make sure that it is more clearly defined.
And another one that goes right to a question there about the intent for funds is it better have a diversity of intent for funds, or if it's all intended for salary, is that a red flag? The answer, this question is an informative question for us. It does not matter to us if you are applying part of it to your telephone, part of it to salaries, part of it to copy paper. That doesn't matter, or you're applying it all to salaries. This is an information piece for PCF, and that is exactly why this answer is not shared with the full application review committee, because we don't want people making determinations with the final awards as to whether or not, this one asks for a little bit here and a little bit there. And we also don't need it spelled out line item by line item. We really just want to know we are using it for these. We're using it all for salaries is a perfect answer for this. We're using it for copy paper and telephone and salaries and 3 other items. That's a perfect answer for this as well. We don't need it by dollar amount. This is not a budget.
Perfect. That's really good clarity, Duggan. Thank you. So this question about reductions in funding, It is required, so please complete it to the best of your comfort level. We are very interested in understanding what interruptions our community has experienced because of changes in federal funding patterns, and in private giving. And so you hear a lot, right? If you're listening at all right now, there are a lot of anecdotes that are being provided. And so this information about any reduction in funding that your organization has seen since the beginning of 2025, it could be local and federal government contracts. It might be you've noticed a dip in your private donations. This will just really help PCF have an understanding of what, if any, the impact on Pinellas County has been with some of the changes we've been hearing about. This is not going to be shared with the full application review committee. This is something that's really going to help us understand how we can help continue to strengthen our community against all threats. So please feel free to be as descriptive or non-descriptive as you'd like. This information will help PCF, and we're hoping that it will help us help the community. So that's why we've asked this question about a reduction in funding. So that's the end of the questions that everybody's going to get. So if you answer the question that you are an arts and culture organization, these are going to be questions for you. And we did our best to make sure that they kind of mirror each other between arts and culture and the direct services. So you'll see some similarities. But of course, you all are providing different services, so there are some different questions. First is we're going to ask you to define which discipline you are supporting. There might be several, and there might not be your particular option on this list. So if that happens and you do select other, another question will come up and you can type free form what those disciplines are that your organization is promoting. We do ask about your overall artistic and cultural programming. We just want to know, what you do in the community and if there's any recent key accomplishments that you're proud of. We do like to hear about that. It helps us understand, how y'all are doing. We do want to know about the community that you're serving, the audiences that you're engaging with. So we ask that you describe who your community is, who is your primary audience. We're hoping that we'll see information here that is specifically related to Pinellas County. We are less interested in how you attract tourists to your programming. So that's something that we really do want to, who is your local audience that you are engaging with? Community impact, how do you benefit the community that you're engaging with? What is the positive impact of your programming on the audience? And then community engagement, how do you make sure that the people who are in your audience are aware of your programming? Are you using marketing tools? Are you attending community events to let people know about your existence? What are your engagement techniques that you are using? Hopefully one of those engagement tools is a feedback loop. Are you seeking feedback from your audience members, from the people who participate in your programming so that you can provide stronger programming, more diverse offerings, more accessible offerings? How are you using this participant feedback to improve the impact of your organization? And you can use examples as needed just to kind of share like what would that process look like? Is there a cost to participate in your programming? We typically prioritize programming that is accessible without cost, but sometimes costs are required in order for your programming to be successful, right? That's just how it goes. So understanding what that looks like. Do you use a sliding scale? Do you have programming that some is paid and some is not? Just explaining what that looks like and how people are able to gain access to your programming is what we're curious about with this question. If there's anything else that you'd like to share, maybe your character limits got you, or there's more information that allows us to understand what your organization does and how they do it, you can certainly share here. And then we are asking, how much time did you dedicate to the LOI? Part of our intention is for this to be an easy process for our applicants. And so we are asking this question for both our arts and culture and our direct services folks. You will also receive an anonymous survey after you complete the LOI. So if you don't want to tell us directly with your name attached to it what we could do differently, you'll have an opportunity in that anonymous survey. But that information is really helpful, and it helps us to create these processes in the most efficient way possible. So I'm going to pause real quick before we move into the direct services, because I did see some questions come through.
Rebecca,
Yes.
there was a question about, we've gotten word of a delay in funding that could mean we don't get the funds. Should that, and I'm believing that that might be federal funds, should that go in the reduced funding section? You could also get the funds, but it's looking like it's unlikely. I would say yes. That's information that's helpful to us, and you could explain it just like that. That this is the type of funding that it is. We've gotten word that it's been delayed. We think it's highly unlikely, but we could always receive it and let us know what the impact to that is. Again, that is information for us, and it's helpful. And to the extent that we get answers of substance, and we can share that out from this application process, anonymized, of course, so that we can all hear from our colleagues what kind of impact is happening to our community. We will share that information, but that would be the ideal place to put that. And then there was one that was asking sort of what category they fit in, and it is a organization that has a special needs ballroom dance program. And since it appears that the organization, the primary focus is providing dance instruction, then that would probably go in the arts and culture application. If that's the primary function of the organization is teaching dance, and that would be where that application would go. If you have additional questions sort of on an individualized basis and really want to make sure, reach out, and one of our grants team would be happy to have more conversation about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. And I did see a couple of questions come in about the time spent in webinars. Yes, please count this time spent in webinars. If you go back and watch this webinar 6 more times, count each of those times, because that will help us understand the true impact of this application on your time. Some of y'all are volunteers, like really trying to make this as streamlined and as painless as possible for you all. So let me see. Okay, it looks like those are all of our sort of focused questions on the LOI piece. So we'll move into the direct services programming questions that we have in the LOI. So remember, if you are at the beginning of the application and you have selected direct community services as your track, this is going to be the series of questions that you are asked. We just finished up talking through arts and culture. These are ones that are focused on our direct community services. Oh, okay. We do ask for a program description. So just describing your services, your programming, of course, any recent key accomplishments that you're proud of. We want to know what your organization does. So we got your mission statement. Now we want to know about the work that you're doing. In terms of the community that you're serving, who is your target population, and why are they so important to reach? How do you define who your folks are? Who are you serving? We also want to know how you are engaging with those individuals. How are you marketing and communicating with the folks that you are hoping are going to avail themselves of your services? Are you knocking on doors? Are you at events? Are you on Facebook? Right? How do you typically engage with your audience, and how do you let people know that you are in the community? We also want to know how you are evaluating your impact. So, how do you know that what you're doing is working? Hopefully, one of the ways that you are providing that evaluation is by having feedback loops with the people who are using your services. How are they engaging with you all, and how are they providing feedback? And has that feedback actually changed how your organization does something? We're very interested in that type of flexibility and understanding of your community. In terms of outcomes, I apologize. This formatting is terrible. I will address this before Monday, I promise. But what we are curious about is how are you looking at the impact of the work that you're doing, and how do you know if you're making a difference? So we're asking you to describe the change that your organization is trying to affect. What changes are you trying to make in your community? Who are you expecting to experience the change? The example that we provide, it might be families, it might be youth in foster care, it might be older adults. This should have alignment and overlap a little bit with your target population if you think about continuity through your application. So just as a note, we hope that we will see similarities between those answers. And what is your goal for this outcome? How do you know that you've succeeded? If you've identified the change, you've implemented a program, how do you know that that program is working? And so this is something that we will cover in more detail during our outcomes webinar on July 31st, which the registration links are on the website. But this is just something where we want to know that you are actively evaluating the work that you're doing to make sure that the work that you're doing is impactful. With our measurement question, again, this will be updated on Monday to be more clear, but we want to know what tools you are using to measure those outcomes. There might be assessments that you've borrowed from other subject matter experts. There might be tools that you've worked with academics to create and make sure that they're validated. There might be other mechanisms that you are using. Some folks use pre and post assessment surveys. There's a number of tools that you could be using, and so that's what we're asking for here. And again, this will also be covered in that outcomes webinar, and the question itself will be worded a little more clearly by the time you all see it on Monday. We do ask if there's anything else that you'd like to share. And then we also ask our direct services people about the time that they have dedicated to the LOI. So that is our LOI walkthrough. Let's see what other questions we have been able to pull in.
So Rebecca,
Yes.
one on here said that they've had a hard time finding an affordable auditor for their nonprofit, and if anyone can direct us, please share. So we can certainly, that can be something that we can share, different firms that we know are offering audit opportunities for nonprofits. We have seen an increase in cost. As many things have increased in cost, we know that that's increased in cost. I think what's important to know about our operating grants is that an audit is not required in order to apply for an operating grant. However, if you do have an audit that is done, we do ask that you share the most recent audit results with PCF, but that does not come into play until the full application. That is not part of the letter of intent.
Thank
We
you.
also,
So
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Can requests for funding go to compensation for new positions or program expenses if a nonprofit is aiming to expand what they offer? And yes, absolutely, they can go for expansion, and you can help explain that in the section that we asked, how are you going to use this funding? You could very much explain right there that it's for an expansion of programming, and that's what you're asking for. And then
So I think
similarly,
there's
go ahead.
only There's only one that is specifically about the LOI, and I'm excited to hear your response to this because I am still learning a great deal about the arts and culture sector in our community. But how do we define improve cultural awareness?
Yes. So that would cover organizations that help individuals and our community really understand or deepen our understanding of cultural identity, community history, lived experience. And the goal is to support projects that or organizations in the arts and culture space, especially those who might be offering things like community events or public programs that are helping to celebrate and explore specific cultural traditions, those that might offer workshops or trainings on the importance of sharing our differences as individuals and how does that contribute to our community life here. Programming, especially in the arts and culture space, it's going to engage different people across backgrounds. Those are some examples of ways that we categorize that within that particular funding about improving cultural awareness.
Awesome. Thank you. That always helps me as well. So I appreciate your insights on that. I don't see any other questions that are specific to the LOI, so we will save answers to these for the very end. Some of these we did answer previously in the recording, so please be sure to, it's not a recording yet, but we answered earlier in the webinar, so please be sure to go back and review if you are uncertain about anything, but we will answer the questions that are in the Q&A before we close. In terms of just next steps generally, our letter of intent window, the application will open on July 14th. It will be in our grants portal. If you have not set up your access already, I encourage you to do that now before we are trying to also field technology and eligibility questions. So get in before the group gets a little busy. Our next webinar is going to be on July 31st. And the link to register is in our, make sure I have the right one. Oh, that is not going to do it, I'm afraid. We will put the link in the chat before we close today, but it is also live on our website, so you can register for that July 31st webinar today if you'd like. The letter of intent window is going to close at noon on Monday, August 11th. The intention for this is to make sure that if you are having technical difficulties with your submission, that there is a staff person available to help you. So if you are having a hard time with your submission on Monday, August 11th, please reach out to our team before noon. We cannot accept any late submissions. Once we have had the opportunity to review those LOIs, we will share out the decisions on September 2nd. And for those folks who have moved forward through the into the full application window, we will have another webinar at 11 on September 3rd to talk through the questions that are in that process, as well as the support that will be available from PCF staff during the full application window. So in terms of LOI support, you will have access to our team starting, well, I mean, you reach out now, we can help you get into the grant portal, but for LOI specific support, we're available from July 14th through August 11th for technology and eligibility related questions. And so those are really the only areas that we can help with because PCF staff is the group that is helping to process and review those submitted LOIs. So we can't give advice on how to make your LOI stronger. So with that is all of the information that we have to share in the webinar. So if you feel that you have gotten all your questions answered and you're good to go, you're welcome to drop off. We appreciate you joining us, but we will take time to answer those questions that are still in that, that Q&A.
And Rebecca, one of them was the outcomes information. There's the outcomes webinar. It's on the grants page, the operating grants page. Toward the bottom, there are several webinar links, but Brittany also made sure that the link for registration was in the chat as well. But you can get that by going to the operating grants link specifically, and I'll also just make sure the operating grants link itself for that specific page is in the chat as well for everybody. Um, if um, if you get the good question about reporting, if you are awarded an operating grant, what kind of reporting are we looking for? And it is reporting based on answers that you put into the full application. We want to know about how you did related to outcomes, and if things were similar or different than what you had put in your application. We like to know things about, did you expend all of the money that was awarded to you? There are other questions. It is not a difficult reporting format for organizations. We do ask that you report it timely. We also ask questions about success stories and information about how this operating grant funding made your work possible or was able to help you grow your capacity as an organization. And then those are due. One of them will be due at the end of each payment year, so that you can provide that. And we also like to know what lessons were learned. Maybe things didn't go as expected, and you can honestly share that they didn't go as expected, or some things have changed. You're welcome, even in the reporting part, if things are changing for your organization and you have questions after you've been awarded a grant, you can certainly reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that.
Absolutely. One of the questions I see is if you are looking to expand the evaluation that you are currently using to measure those outcomes, could the request support a third-party evaluation? Yes, absolutely. We love our evaluators here at PCF, so that is certainly something that we would encourage you to use that those operating funds for. So the question is, should we calculate our annual expenditures in Pinellas County based on this current operating year? However, this particular grantee or attendee, their funding in Pinellas will be greatly reduced at the end of the summer, and that is not reflective of what has historically been in Pinellas County. So I assume that this reduction in funding would likely carry forward into 26 and 27.
And if it is, I think we'd like to know what the reality is going forward. And so to share that sort of the look forward if there is going to be a major reduction. But that's also something that to provide context could be more further explained in the reductions in funding section. You could explain in there that there has been greater expense in Pinellas County prior to the applying for this grant, and maybe some of the reasons that has changed, just to provide some context around that. But if there is a belief that funding will be dramatically reduced and that will continue forward, to use what is the most current information about your total expenditures when you answer that question.
Perfect. Thank you. That is helpful. Just some housekeeping questions. It looks like, is a sample provided anywhere? Yes, once the application goes live, you'll be able to download a Word version of the questions in the LOI. Someone asked if two different people
Rebecca?
using, I'm sorry,
I
go ahead.
I think that was also about the reporting. And so we could provide a copy of what the most recent operating grant report looks like, and the questions that are asked as well. It might change a little bit. There's no guarantee that that'll be exactly the same report, but giving people some context as to how much we're asking for, and what length of report you're going to need to give us, we can make sure that that's available too.
Awesome. That's helpful context. Thank you. We also had a question from someone curious about whether or not two different people from two different email addresses could work on the application simultaneously. The answer is yes. There is a collaboration tool that you should be able to use in the grant portal. If you have any trouble with that, please reach out to our team and we can activate that for you. Brittany just raised her hand, so we are on it for you all. Would a private school with a nonprofit entity be eligible for the operating grant? Go ahead.
I think whoever sent that, it would be appreciated if you would probably email our team and we can have more context about that, to know exactly what the entity is that's connected. I think there would be eligibility if that entity that's connected has a publicly accessible or very public purpose. And that would be potentially eligible, but I think we need to know more details about that before giving an answer here.
Thank you. Someone would like to know if they have partial funding for their project. For example, the annual cost is $40,000. Can they ask for $20,000 and get another $20,000 from a different source? Yes, absolutely. Just keeping in mind what these eligible expenses are and making sure that that's what the funds are used for. If you're a new organization located in Pinellas, assisting the Pinellas community, and you are living off of small donations, how can we mention our budget if it is minimal? And I assume the operating grants would only be covering the lease at this time. That's a great use for an operating grant, is for leases.
Yes. And you'll be able, we don't ask it here because we're trying to make the LOI as accessible as possible, but you'll have an opportunity if you're invited to complete the full application to put together a more detailed budget that allows us to know sort of your total revenue and expense as an organization. So you're welcome to just think about that in the future, but we'd be happy to help if you have a strong application, even though you're small.
Thank you. And this is the last question that we have in our Q&A, and it's not necessarily related to operating grants, but when we ask about the information where your organization may have experienced a reduction in funding, this person is curious about whether or not we will share this information with our donors. And Duggan, I'll ask you to answer that one.
Yes, and so this one was specifically asking about donor-advised fund holders. And so that information can certainly be shared with donor-advised fund holders. We provide regular content for those people who have donor-advised funds or specific funds at PCF. So we'd be glad to include the sort of a survey type data that we receive from that reduction in funding question. But we'd be able to share that not just with donor advised fund holders, but donors to the foundation in general. We have more than donor advised fund holders here, but we have people who regularly support the foundation and also support our operating grants programming, and be happy to share that information with them as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. I know it's a little off topic, but the information does help us. It helps us inform the community about what's going on, which is part of our focus. So y'all, we are right at 3:30. So I appreciate everyone's participation. I appreciate the opportunity to help you all through this process. I'm looking forward to learning more about a lot of you and understanding the work that you all do in Pinellas County. And if you do have questions, please feel free to email our team at grants@pinellascf.org. Phone calls, we will do our best to keep up, but if the same influx of emails comes in as phone calls, we're going to be drowning. So please just let us know how we can help. And Duggan or Brittany, if there's anything y'all want to share before we sign off.
Good.
All right, y'all take care. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.